look, we had, I think, a bit of a tough day for sport. The heads of some of the biggest organisations today spoke to the Oireachtas COVID-19 response committee, and they made it very clear that the future is looking very, very stark. And we heard from Philip Brown there at the top of the show, a little clip from him, and it is pretty scary. Philip Brown warned that the professional game here could cease to exist by next year if supporters continue to be locked out of stadiums. In terms, FAI CEO Gary Owens said that he fears for the 2021 League of Ireland season, and also indicated that debates loom about next summer's Euros, which some of them are due to be staged here. And then the GA Director General Tom Ryan was also speaking, and he said his association would double down on its efforts to ensure protocol and safety would be very high if increased numbers of supporters were allowed to attend games in the near future. Now, to dissect the day's events, because they were quite large, we are joined by Rob Hartnett of Sport for Business. Rob, you're very welcome, and I think, look, just listening to all of that today, it's very clear that sport needs help.
Thanks, Marie. Yes, indeed, it was a big day for sport. It was a day of dizzying figures. If you're not involved in sport and the administration of sport on a day-to-day basis, they will have come as something of a shock. But the IRFU talking about a projected loss for this year of 35 million euros, the GAA talking about a hole in the finances of 50 million as well. And both of those organisations, as well as the FAI, very much in tune with the idea of getting fans back into stadia. And looking back over the financial reports of all of the organisations over the last 12 months, you can see exactly why that is such an important element. 84 million of income that received by Irish Rugby came from representative matches in the year ending June 2019. Matchday revenue in the GAA just from the championship alone was 36.1 million in 2019 as well. And of course, as we know, the income from both of those organisations in terms of matchday revenue this year will be close to zero. So when you think of the cost of putting on those matches, the GAA pinned that at about 35% of a cost to sales ratio. So you're looking at tens of millions of euros that has just evaporated completely. Now the GAA, obviously, it's helping to fund clubs, it's helping to fund regional organisations across the whole country. But rugby is perhaps in a more parlous situation because of the professional game here. 45 million was the cost of the professional game in 2019, much of that going in wages to players. And of course, those wages are still being paid. So the costs in rugby in particular are still racking up, and the income has just disappeared off the face of the planet.
Rob, just on that, the kind of pro side of it, but it was good to see today. Normally, organisations can work in silos and look after themselves. It was brilliant to see the FAI, the GA and the RFU work together and kind of nearly share the pain of the trouble they're all in.
It very much is like sport as a family, and you know, there's an awful lot more that unites us than divides us. You're going to see that more as well over the course of the coming days, because a week ago, each of the three organisations, together with representatives of Sport Ireland representing other sports, we shouldn't forget the other sports as well, like basketball and gymnastics, athletics and swimming, all taking a big hit too. But they've come together to look at a plan that will enable people to get back into stadia. They mentioned today the fact that getting 5,000 into a stadium like the Aviva would be good, but it would have no bearing whatsoever on the financial elements of it. And Gary Owens spoke about the European Super Cup this week, taking place in Budapest. There's a trial there where they're going to allow 20,000 into the crowd. In the Football League in England, there's 7 matches over the course of this weekend that they're allowing 1,000 spectators in. And there's going to be lessons learned from each of those in terms of how you do it, and more importantly, how you do it safely. So all three organisations coming together, they're going to put a plan to government through the expert group, which the government established back in the summer to help advise them on matters of sporting interest. And all three of them working really closely together, just trying to get the right thing, because it's the financial element, but it's also the social, the well-being side of sport that is so important. And particularly on a day like today where, well, in Dublin at least, we've got the blow of moving to level 3 and the loss of juvenile games coming through in GAA, and, you know, a big hit there to the sporting mentality. But the fact that sport can continue and that the morale boost it brings is still there for all of us is really important, and I think government has recognised that. They've made money available already. There's a total of 70 million on the table, which is being distributed and being managed out through clubs there's bigger amounts of money available for each of the organisations to try and just mitigate some of the financial loss. But it is, in sport, as always, more than the financial matters that are important.
And Rob, just given where we are, like in a pandemic, and you know, we're in sport, we're obviously hugely invested in sport. You know, it's something that we love. It's our jobs. It's our pastimes. It's our interest. But there's obviously a whole lot of other things going on, and a whole lot of other industries who are suffering as well. But yet, sport wants to be prioritised, and they are looking for quite a lot of money. And you know, a lot of it will go to elite sport and professional sport. Do you think that they should be prioritised?
Well, I think that you have to look at sport in the round, because that elite level of it, and you look at it and you see, well, the wages that might be paid to a professional rugby player, you look at that in isolation and you think, is that really the best way that government should be actually funding money? But it's not going to that. That's only a part of it, a very small part of it. And the biggest part is going to fund clubs. You look at the IRFU accounts, 11 million of their accounts last year went to clubs and grassroots. Over 80% of the GAA money goes back into its units, back out into clubs and environments. And we saw during the darkest days of the lockdown and the pandemic how sporting clubs and communities really came to the aid of the wider community as well. There was parcels being delivered out to elderly people who were cocooning. There's the joy when we came back of young teams coming out and playing and training and getting to talk to each other again. My own daughter was supposed to be playing in a championship semi-final now tomorrow, Bakula out against St. Bridget's, and that's not going to happen now. It'll be pushed back 3 weeks. But we do have to keep in mind the importance of sport in so many people's lives, the way that they conduct themselves, the way that we identify ourselves. It really is so important. And if part of that money is going towards the professional game, and, we're going to watch as Leinster take on Saracens in the Aviva Stadium tomorrow. We're not going to watch it live. There should have been 45, 48, 50,000 people in there generating 2 million of revenue. That's what comes, and those are the heroes. Donncha speaking there about Pat O'Hara giving the jersey, Ibra giving over his jersey last night. Professional athletes, they're just part of the bigger picture of sport.
And one of the things that is part of the bigger picture are major championships as well. And Gary Owens did reveal today that there are concerns about the Euros and how they'll be received. Rob, sport for business is what you do. What are you feeling about them?
I would be concerned. And in part, it's based on the evidence that we saw only 10 days ago when European athletics withdrew the Ireland's and Dublin's hosting of this year's European cross-country championships. And the logic behind it was Ireland's position in relation to social distancing, in relation to the way that people had to isolate, the way that people were handling the crisis. We're handling the crisis in the best interests of public health and as advised to us by NEFIT. But looking at it from outside, from a European perspective, where other European countries might be doing things in a slightly more relaxed fashion, European athletics decided that Ireland wasn't really in a great position to host it. Now, that was December, and the Euros won't be until June. So there's plenty of time still to play out. And UEFA will want nothing more than to be able to bring those 4 games to Dublin. But they will be looking at it in the round, and it's probably going to be, in a couple of months' time that they will be taking a look at each of the countries, at how they're handling things in relation to sport. It will be a huge blow. It'll be the biggest sporting event that we've ever hosted in Ireland if those 4 games come here, regardless as to whether the Republic of Ireland or Northern Ireland have qualified for them. It'll be a huge blow, both financially, morale-wise, everything, to lose them. But, we are on tenterhooks. It's not a given at the moment that either us or indeed any of the stadia that are hosting it would be in a position as well. Wembley is in the same. The UK is going through some pretty dark days itself in relation to the virus. We're just in the same position as everybody else. We're waiting. We're hoping for the best. And, to be honest, sport is all about that. We have to be optimistic in sport, or else what's the point of it? And, we have to always believe that we're going to win the next game or win the next tackle or break the next record. And, hopefully we just have to hope for the best, that we actually come through this with all the public health guidelines in place, but also with sport in a manner that means that it's sustainable throughout 2021 and for long into the future.
Well, there are some big rugby games that are going to come a lot quicker than those Euros next summer, and they're the Six Nations and the Autumn Nations Cup. Michael Corcoran caught up with Philip Brown today to ask him about fans returning to games.
We're in a position where we need to produce a route map as to how we move from zero to full house. And there's going to be various stages along the way. It's going to be incremental, I would imagine. And we will put that together over the next number of weeks. We'll bring it to the expert group in Sport Ireland and NEFIT, and we'll try and work with them to see how we can plan for major events in our stadia. And listen, it's going to be dictated ultimately by the guidelines that come from NEFIT and by the where we are in the cycle of the virus itself. So, but all we can do is put our best foot forward.
Rob, we hear there from Philip Brown, we've heard from Tom Ryan, Gary Owens. The sporting bodies have put their cards on the table. What can we expect now from the Dáil Committee and government?
We are only a small part of the jigsaw that they're having to deal with. It was good to have the opportunity to actually state the case for sport today. And I think that honestly, politicians will always listen to what their constituents and what the people out there want. And people want sport. So I think that they will certainly have listened carefully today. They have already taken the first steps by making that pot of 70 million available as well. And we have to hope that the position that sport has always had in Irish public life will continue, albeit while recognising the fact that there are many, many other sectors like the hospitality, entertainment sector, so many others that have, a call on government resource. But we think that sport is important, and if we can't have the courage of our conviction to actually go out there and say that to the people who are making the decisions, then that would be a sad day. But today we did get the opportunity to say it, and hopefully the ears were open.
It is a tough time, and we're waiting for that official government announcement to say that we are moving into level 3 of restrictions. And that does raise a lot of questions about sport. And Rob, you touched on how important it is. We're still going to be able to train at the weekends, but there's a lot of kids out there who are not going to be able to play their matches. You mentioned your daughter there, and that's a big blow for them.
It is. They really do enjoy it. They wouldn't do it otherwise. It's great to be able to actually have groups of people that you can go and you can hang out with and you can chat with and you can play alongside and grow up alongside. So hopefully, the kids that are playing now will still be going on. It was Féile semi-finals weekend in Dublin this weekend as well. So, if level 3 comes in, which looks inevitable now, then all of the juvenile games in the GAA are automatically called off. The adult matches can still go ahead. So, we just have to hold our breath. It's 3 weeks. So, hopefully we'll be out of this at the beginning of October. And in a year like this, where so many things that would have seemed impossible at the beginning of the year have actually materialised. We could be in the thick of GAA inter-county championships at that time. We could still have those juvenile championships that are played out to their conclusion. And hopefully that will be the case. The guidelines are that training will be able to continue. It'll be non-contact, so hopefully they'll be able to practice their kicking of points and scores, and still manage to get together and have a laugh, even if it is socially distanced, which probably will need to be the case.
I think so too. Well, Rob, since you started that answer, the Taoiseach Micheál Martin has started his speech and he has confirmed Dublin's move to level 3. Rob, Hartnett Sport for Business, thanks so much for joining us. We're going to take a quick break and then we're going to talk about rugby, and we're going to enjoy it, Donncha, because it's good to have sport.